After the humiliation at Marathon, Persia prepared for vengeance. The son of Darius inherited his father's ambition and his thirst for conquest. Across the Hellespont, a floating bridge was built to bring Asia into Europe. An empire began to move, an army that would blot out the sun. A canal was cut through mountains, ensuring no ship would ever be lost again. Every grain, spear, and soldier was counted, the empire's machine in motion. From the heart of Persia came the immortals, elite warriors of fear and precision. From every corner of the empire they came, men of countless tongues and colors. Even war elephants marched for Xerxes, symbols of unstoppable strength. By sea and land, Xerxes commanded the might of a world-spanning empire. It was an army meant to conquer not by brilliance, but by sheer mass. Xerxes saw himself not as a man, but as a god destined to rule all nations. In the heart of the empire, forges burned without rest, preparing for divine vengeance. Every necessity of war, food, arrows, shelter, moved like veins feeding the beast. Before the march, the gods were invoked, fire and blood sealing the empire's destiny. Xerxes' council planned the invasion that would end Greek defiance once and for all. From afar, the Greeks watched and trembled at the size of the storm coming. Every banner a declaration, Persia would bow to no one. It was the largest force the world had ever seen, moving like a living empire. And at the head of it all stood Xerxes, the god king, sailing toward immortality. The Greek world, divided by pride, now faced a common enemy. For once, even Sparta prepared to stand with others. Athens feared the storm more than any other city. At Corinth, Greece stood at a crossroads, unity or extinction. Themistocles, the voice of reason amidst fear, demanded a fleet. Even the proud Spartans bowed to necessity. Thus, the Hellenic League was born, a fragile alliance of necessity. Sparta would command the land, its warriors unmatched in courage. Athens forged its salvation in wood and wind. The navy would be their shield. He saw what others could not. The war would be won at sea. They would fight where the land narrowed, where numbers meant less. Thermopylae, the gate where the earth pressed against the sea. At sea, Artemisium would mirror Thermopylae's stand. The people prayed, not just for victory, but survival. Every Greek knew freedom demanded sacrifice. One man's vision would light the path for all Greece. For the first time, many shields bore one purpose. In the silence before dawn, Greece waited. Here they would stand or die together. United at last, Greece prepared to defy the world's greatest empire. In the shadow of the mountains, the Greeks prepared to defy an empire. Leonidas, king of Sparta, led his men into the jaws of death without fear. Their wall of shields stood as a fortress of flesh and iron. The Persians came in waves, immortals among men. They fought not for glory, but for time itself. The rain of arrows met a wall of unyielding discipline. Wave after wave, the Persians broke upon the rocks of Sparta. They fought shoulder to shoulder, brothers in defiance. The narrow pass denied Persia its greatest weapon, mobility. Xerxes, the god king, began to doubt his invincibility. Even Persia's elite could not shatter the wall of shields. Each hour they held was a message to all Greece. Freedom still lived. Their defiance sent ripples across the Hellenic world. They knew dawn might bring their final stand, but betrayal would undo what courage had built. Through a hidden path, the Persians found their way behind the Greeks. Leonidas chose to stand, not for victory, but for legacy. The 300 and their allies faced the storm with unbroken shields. His death became eternal, a symbol of defiance. Thermopylae was lost, but Greece had found its courage. After Haton's fury, the world trembled before Saladin's rising power. His armies swept like wildfire across the Crusaded lands. Fortress after fortress fell to the might of the Ayyubid Sultan. City after city surrendered before his unstoppable advance. There was little resistance left, only broken garrisons and fading hope. United under one banner, his legions moved with divine purpose, their leaders' eyes fixed on one final prize, Jerusalem. The holy city lay exposed, stripped of its defenders. Inside, the people trembled, knowing their end was near. They turned to Balian of Ibelin, the knight who escaped Haton's slaughter. He armed the people, farmers, merchants, even children, for one last stand. But Jerusalem could not withstand the Sultan's might for long. Balian fought with valor, but the walls were doomed to fall. At last, he sought mercy, not for glory, but for his people's lives. Saladin agreed, a surrender without slaughter, mercy over vengeance. On October 2nd, 1187, Jerusalem opened its gates to Saladin. 88 years of Crusader rule had ended that morning. No massacre followed, only quiet departures and tearful goodbyes. He spared them, mercy where once there had been vengeance. Thus ended the Crusaders' reign and began Saladin's legend of honor. As Thermopylae raged on land, another battle stirred upon the waves. Themistocles led the Athenian fleet into the Straits of Artemisium, outnumbered but unbroken. The brilliant Athenian admiral devised a plan to trap the Persians within the narrow straits. In those narrow waters, numbers would mean nothing, only discipline and courage. The Persian navy advanced, confident in sheer numbers and size. Wood shattered and steel clashed as the Greeks fought with ferocity unmatched. Even as fire consumed their ships, the Persians pressed on. Through smoke and flame, Themistocles' mind remained razor-sharp. Then, nature itself turned against Persia, a storm sent by the gods. For 3 days they held, neither side victorious, but Greece still breathing. But then came the news that broke them. Thermopylae had fallen. Knowing Athens itself was now exposed, Themistocles made a painful choice. Athens would not surrender. It would move its heart across the sea. Families left everything behind, their homes, their gods, their memories. The proud city stood silent, its people gone, its spirit unbroken. The Persians entered Athens, victorious, yet chasing ghosts. Themistocles knew this was not defeat, but the prelude to vengeance. At Salamis, they would gather again for the fight that would decide Greece's fate. And so began the next chapter, the fight for Greece's very soul. The sea would soon bear witness to Greece's defiance and its destiny. The sea claimed its first king. Frederick Barbarossa drowned before reaching the Holy Land. His death shook the Crusader cause to its core. Philip of France quarreled with Richard and soon withdrew. Only Richard remained, the Lionheart, fierce and unbroken. He reached Acre, a city under siege and shrouded in smoke. For months he battled relentlessly, breaking walls, breaking will. The siege of Acre was long, brutal, unforgiving. At last, Acre fell, and the Lionheart had triumphed. But his eyes were already set upon Jaffa, a step toward Jerusalem. Richard marched south, disciplined, unstoppable. Saladin gathered his forces, the desert's fury awakening once more. His horse archers struck fast, like waves of flame across the sand. But Richard's men held firm, unbroken, precise, relentless. The heat burned, the arrows tore through armor and flesh, but discipline held, order amidst chaos. Saladin struck again and again, a storm without end. And in the heart of the storm rode the Lionheart himself. With a single command, the Crusaders unleashed their fury. The desert roared as steel met faith. At Arsuf, the Lionheart endured, and the legend of Richard was forged in fire. The sun burned over Arsuf, and the tide of war pressed closer. At the head rode Richard, iron-willed, unyielding, forged for battle. The arrows fell like rain, death whispering through the air. They held the line, their arms heavy, their spirits flickering like dying embers. From afar, Saladin watched, patient, waiting for the falcon's strike. The line trembled, faith against fatigue. Then, two broke ranks, hearts blazing against orders. Steel met flesh, and the desert roared in fury. Seeing the spark ignite, Richard roared the order, "Charge!" 500 knights, the fury of heaven unleashed upon the earth. The earth split with the sound of judgment. The falcon's wings tore the storm apart. In one strike, the banner of fear was torn down. Even legends trembled before the charge of lions. The king stood alone, staring into the vanquished storm. Victory, bought with blood and silence. For every triumph, the earth remembers its fallen. Even the great must bow before fate. They had not won Jerusalem, but they had won the world's respect. The legend of 500 knights would echo through time.